Um, the scarf concept is one is very intriguing because I'm not familiar with this construct. You've got my brain here firing on all cylinders. Have you seen this construct move into the solution selling literature at all? And how do you think we can move some of these concepts forward? I haven't seen it in the Miller-Heinemann methodologies, the Challenger sale, sort of that brain science feeling overlay, and getting all the things you're talking about to go a little bit more mainstream. Is this still in its early stages? Mike, not all sales professionals think about brain science, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's two things here. So number one is this idea that imperfection sells better than perfection. So transparency sells better than perfection. Not only because there's this pervasiveness of reviews now, and remember when I said that there's usually a 5 to 10 year lag before it really impacts buyers, and we're really starting to see it now. So you can't go to a website that doesn't have reviews anymore, like they all do. And so it's, item A there is, as sellers, we can no longer hide our flaws and expect to get away with it. But item B is, because of the brain science, embracing our flaws and leading with them actually has magical impacts on that feeling center that drives our decision making. So it's a win-win. And if you're not embracing it now because of the brain science, you're going to have to because of the pervasiveness of reviews that, if they're not already out there on your products and services, I can promise you in the next year or two, they'll start popping up, they'll start making an impact, and your buyers will come to the table to talk to you and know what they are and know what they're getting themselves into. So, that's part of it. I think to this question of like, how do we increase buyer trust in sales professionals? That's part of it. There was a study, I don't know if you've seen this, and for your listeners here, Gallup, the Gallup organization, which is a big research organization, every year, right around December, they publish the annual study of the most to least trusted professions. And like, as you can imagine, at the top of the list, like every year, are things like nurses and veterinarians and that sort of thing. At the bottom of the list every year is salespeople, specifically car sales. And I just bought a car last week and just wrote an article about how awful that experience was. Like, that hasn't gotten any better. Like telemarketers, and those two are only beaten in terms of, on the bad side, by members of Congress. So salespeople, members of Congress, at the bottom of the list every year. And like I said, I think that if we understand this idea that embracing our flaws and leading with transparency actually helps our sales, I would expect that that salespeople would start to become a more trusted and value-added piece of a sales engagement, or a buyer on their buying journey, the salesperson helping to Sherpa them through it. And there's still going to be terrible salespeople, which give a bad name to the rest. But I don't think those people are going to be around long with this pervasiveness of reviews and feedback. I just don't. So if you think about what that means, though, so we're talking a lot of theoretical, can I give you kind of a goofy example with the next slide, if you want to pop ahead here? Like, think about, I'm sure all of you have been to an IKEA. Like, IKEA, for the 8th straight year, is the #1 furniture retailer in the world. And I always think it's funny that, if you were a furniture retailer, wouldn't you think they would be super easy to beat? Like, what a terrible experience. You walk in, it's really hard to find what you're looking for, but you grab a shopping cart or whatever, and you go through the labyrinth of hallways, with like kids screaming, running by you. You finally find what you want. Let's say it's a dresser or like a bedroom piece of furniture. There's no salesperson there to help you. So you have to actually write down the code, because you're going to go to the warehouse yourself and find it, put it onto a cart that somehow they designed without brakes, which I think is a massive oversight. And then you're going to wheel it out into the parking lot. You have to back your car in, because you can't actually wheel it all the way out. And then you're going to jam these giant boxes into your hatchback. You're going to drive home, probably with an injury or two. And when you get home, you open the box, and that's when the fun really begins, right? Like there's 150 parts and there's no words on the instructions on how to put it together. So you swear your way through it. And when you're done, you say, oh gosh, you know what? We could probably use a couple of end tables. Let's go back. Like it's crazy how that works. But what IKEA is telling the world is a couple of things. You know, number one retailer, like I said, of furniture in the world for 8 straight years. And it's because they tell the world, hey, listen, we're not going to be good at these things. Like you're buying experience. Yeah, I think there's some people that think parts of that are fun, but we're not going to have salespeople on the floor. We're not going to have people packing your car. We're not even going to deliver this stuff. We're not going to do those things so that we can be really good at giving you modern Scandinavian design furniture that you didn't pay a whole lot for. So for everybody that's listening, there's an opportunity to think about that in your space. What are the things that you as an organization are sacrificing so that you can be really good at your core? You know, like SalesChoice, you don't do everything for all people. And there's an opportunity to embrace that and lead with it and tell the world, hey, listen, these are the things we're not going to do because we're doubling down on X, Y, and Z. That worked for me at Power Reviews. There were some things that weren't as enhanced as some of our competitors, and we would start our conversations with it versus hide it and hope they don't care. And when we led with it, our positives, when we were ready to deliver those, landed so much more firmly because of the brain science of kind of disarming that limbic filter that prevents us from being sold to. So that's a lot, but it's basically this idea of transparency not only is a must do because of the pervasiveness of reviews and feedback, but it actually helps from a brain science perspective, your buyers make better decisions.
I can't help but think about, just to do a linkage back to, you know, AI, where the first modality is usually driven by sensing, right? And just sort of that, you know, simple word with the richness of the 5 senses that come into play, and, you know, the linkages to the limbic brain as, you know, our initial input, you know, sort of linkage, and then overlaying the scarf. Lots to think about here. I know with our team, I'm sure we'll start to embrace some of these concepts and think about, you know, sharing more of our imperfections. You know, we're often taught, as you know, in sales to lead from always a position of strength, right? And not to expose some of those vulnerabilities. And, you know, so it's kind of reinforcing the humanness of the conversation, and not to shy away from embracing that full transparency. It's really deep psychology. Lots to learn here. Many companies, you know, that's going to be a growth evolution. Interesting on the 10 years for things to sink in. Thanks for sharing this example, Todd. So the next question is, can sales professional get other insights on what they're doing right versus wrong?
Yeah, and so, I mean, it certainly is counterintuitive, right? Like leading with your flaws helps you sell. There's a couple of things here to think about. So first of all, I just want to warn people that leading with your flaws does not mean walking into a sales engagement and saying to the customer, hey, this is why we suck. Like that's taking it too far. That 4.2 to 4.5 is actually pretty important. As the supermodel Tyra Banks calls it, it's about embracing being flawsome. Like her word is flawsome, which is embrace your flaws, but know that you're still awesome. And there's certainly a psychology to that. But, you know, there's a couple of things here to think about that, you know, when you ask about what other insights on what they're doing right versus wrong. I mean, sadly, as a sales leader, I looked across my sales floor, and again, leading and pretending we're perfect was a mistake. There was a couple of other things. Like number 2 is this idea that logic is actually polarizing. So, you know, if you look at, you know, like the cognitive biases that are worked up in our brains, like our brains are designed to take shortcuts. You know, we're making, what, 95% plus of our decisions subconsciously every day. And so that was a way to make sure that we don't just wear out. We can't be like deciding to breathe all day, right? So when I say logic is polarizing, it means that, you know, we're now living in this world of consensus selling, where every sales engagement, there's, you know, 8+ buyers. If you walk into a room And let's just imagine we've got 8 buyers and 4 of them are with you, meaning they can't wait to hear what you have to say. Like they're leaning towards going with you. 3 of them are leaning the other way, and 1 is right in the middle. So you walk in and you lead with logic. Here's what happens. So for example, let's say I lead with my NASCAR slide. Like, hey, look at all the awesome customers that we work with. And when I say NASCAR, like if you think about the NASCAR world where like stock cars, they've got logos all over it. A NASCAR slide is a logo slide. So slide with all your logos on it. And you say, hey, look how awesome we are. You'll have 4 of the people that are looking at that saying, yes, if this company is good enough for those logos, they're good enough for us. You're going to have 3 people that are going to go the opposite way and say, wow, we're going to be a small fish in a big pond. Like they've got some big customers. We're not that big. And then there's a 3rd person that might be saying, like that extra person might be saying, man, I don't see any customers on here that are really in our space. Like, do they understand our industry? And so our brains are taking logic, and we think that we're making the case that, man, aren't we awesome? But their brains are actually fighting that based on their cognitive biases that they're bringing into the room. And so instead of leading with logic, we need to be leading with emotion and feeling and stories. There's a super interesting study that took a look at the brains of individuals as they were watching the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the old Clint Eastwood movie. And what they found is during stories, everybody's brains were working in unison. And during the emotional parts, it was like they were looking at the same brain of the entire audience. It's amazing. And on the opposite end, there was another study. There was a study done by Dr. Martin Lindstrom, and hang in there with me on this one because this study is amazing. Like it's the coolest thing I ever heard. What he did, so Dr. Martin Lindstrom, I'm not sure if he's a doctor or not, so excuse me if he's not, but he brought 2,080 smokers into a lab. And he showed them a cigarette warning label as they walked in and said, hey, what does this cigarette warning label make you think? Again, the cigarette warning label is very logical. And these people almost across the board are like, oh, yeah, you know what? I got to quit smoking. Like, you're right. So they're justifying this, like they're justifying to this individual from a logic base, yeah, I got to stop. But then what he did is he put them into an fMRI machine, which is a functional MRI machine that analyzes the brain, and showed them another cigarette warning label. And in almost every case, their brain's craving center went off. So subconsciously, their brain desired a cigarette as a result of reading a cigarette warning label. So warning labels are actually creating the brain incentive to go have a smoke versus what it's intended to do, which is to stop people from smoking. And so that's a long way of saying that when we lead with logic, we can't guess what's going to happen. So we need to start working feeling-centered stories into the way that we pitch. Tell a story. That's what brings consensus buyers together. And so we, instead of leading with the we started telling a story, not about how great we are, but about how great our customer could be. And the results in that case were magic too. So like that's another one. Stop leading with logic. Build a story, reorder your slides in a way that starts with the customer's current state, ends with where the customer could be, and in the middle talks about why that current state is no longer sustainable, and like watch the magic happen. So that's just, those are a couple of things for everybody to think about that I know we were getting wrong. And when we made the change, the results were amazing.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And, I'm thinking about even in terms of our corporate decks, Malay, and how we've structured things, right? Where it's, what we do, our rewards and recognitions, and, maybe bringing up the stories and the journeys and what, some of the challenges were and some of the leadership behaviors. So, yeah, it's interesting. You've got my brain thinking. So you've got this new book out, Todd. It sounds amazing. We've got it here now, thanks to Mr. Amazon. So what are some of the highlights? And obviously, folks can order it at the website noted here. But clearly, your passion got unleashed on getting this message out into the market.
Yeah, and yeah, so you can find it anywhere books are sold. It was kind of a bucket list thing for me, but I saw this as what I call a non-obvious evolution happening in the world of sales. That it's time to embrace transparency, because if we don't, our customers are going to find it anyway, and you erode trust in every interaction when you're not leading with transparency, especially when the answers are there to be found by the buyers. So I wrote the book. It's been going like gangbusters. I actually went into the studio here in Chicago and narrated it myself too. So the audiobook is available anywhere that you buy audiobooks. You can get on a Kindle, all that fun stuff. And I've just been on the road speaking and doing a lot of training to kind of back up some of these concepts and help drive that new presentation choreography, or drive another concept, which is called transparent negotiating, which is totally counterintuitive, but again, the results are pretty magical. And yeah, so that's what my life has become. I went from crazed sales leader to now a speaker and workshop leader, and obviously an author too.
Well, congratulations. I have a sense that there will be a book too, and it might be The Transparent Negotiator, and just delightful to hear all the thoughts in terms of the brain science and the impact and the rewards that can offer, and sort of the key message that, and I love the quote in terms of flawsome, but know you're awesome.
Yeah.
Sort of those contradiction of terms that kind of force us to think deeper. And it'd be great in my lifetime to see sales professionals move up. I think that that's I don't always necessarily like to hear that, because we all we've chosen these careers, right? But it's interesting to hear the customers and the voice views of where they see value, right? So obviously the conversations have to shift significantly. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Malay, who's going to now lead us to the next section and get ready for the questions. And I think he's just going to make a few comments on some of the content that's on our website.
For sure, and it's an interesting conversation to follow up on. And we are, of course, a machine learning driven solution over here at SalesChoice. So trust and transparency in AI has been a core mandate of ours for quite a while now, and we are big proponents of what is now being known as responsible AI, or ethical AI, or trusted AI. There are many names that have been given to it. As part of that mandate and that initiative, we have laid out an AI readiness framework that helps organizations and leaders assess and verify whether they are ready to use AI solution in an effective and responsible manner. That can include everything from being ready internally with your data, your infrastructure, your resources, as well as a clear understanding of where it is that you're intending to go and how that solution will be put to use. And that can make all the difference between a successful implementation or lost dollars and time. Now,